Okay, welcome back to another episode of Ben's Machines. Today we're working on something a little bit unique. I have my friend's 2006 Honda Aqua Trax ski, and this is the Aqua Trax F-12. This is the non-turbo version. So there's the F-12X that has a turbocharged engine. This is the F-12 non-turbo. It has 153 hours on the engine, and it's in the garage today because we're doing an oil change. I'm doing an oil change and I'm doing a little bit of maintenance work on it just to go through it. And there'll be subsequent videos following just to show how we're going to get this thing ready for winter storage. But first, what I want to do is perform the oil change. So this is a four-cylinder Honda engine. There is an oil cap right up here. So right up here there's an oil cap with a dipstick. And then there's also another location right back here in the rear of the engine right here with a little cap on it as well. Okay, so here's the cap. This particular engine is unique where there's a dry sump in the front of the engine, which allows for the engine when it's running to continually circulate lubrication or oil to lubricate all the major components of the engine when the machine is in operation and doing, maybe at times some big maneuvers where the engine is not perfectly horizontal. And there's also a large volume of oil in the crankcase of the engine as well. So maybe that's just one unique part of the ski, is that there's a volume of oil that's in the crankcase of the engine, as well as a smaller volume of oil that's held up in the front in this part of the engine right up here up front. The owner's manual for this device specifies that the engine requires 4.1 liters of 10W40 engine oil, and that's what we're going to put into today. So I have 4 liters of 10W40. So I'm going to begin by inserting that oil into the rear here of the engine. So I'm going to use my funnel, and I'm going to open up this cap here in the back, and I'm just going to start pouring in the oil into this location. So the plan was to follow the instructions in the owner's manual and how to conduct or how to perform an oil change. So here is the location for the oil filter. So I didn't show that in the video, but that's quite easy. You just unscrew this, put a little bit of oil on the new oil filter, and thread it back on. So that's done. The manual specifies that this is the area, or this is the location where the new engine oil gets put in. I guess let me take a step back. It's very important when you undertake this work that you set the jet ski, or the engine is level. So what I've done is that I've used a 2-foot level, and I put a level across the engine on the valve cover, and I made sure that the engine is completely level. You want to do this to make sure that if you're trying to get a reading of what the oil level is, you want to make sure that the engine isn't tipped back or it's not tipped forward. So you want to make sure this is level. So in the course of following the manual to do the oil change, I noticed that I after about 500 milliliters of putting oil in here, this reservoir was full. And that was odd because we know that this engine is supposed to take 4.1 liters. So because this side was full and the level wasn't going down anymore, I then proceeded to filling the rest of the oil through this location right here in the back. So it took a little bit longer using a little funnel and some time. I finally got all the 4 liters or the leftover oil put into this location. So now if you take the dipstick and you basically just insert that into the port until it touches the neck and you pull that out, you'll see that the level is right here. So hopefully you can see that on the camera. The level is right here. So that's within the hash marks. If we verify the level up here in the front, I'll do the same. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this cap back in place, make sure it's hand tight. And I'll do the same for the rear one. So I'll reinstall this cap like this. All right. One of the things that I like to do when I'm conducting maintenance on an engine is just to have a look at the spark plugs. So I thought this might be a good time to see what the spark plugs are like and how to reinstall spark plugs in this engine. So I have the parts right over here. So this engine takes or has an NGK IR or an IMR9D9H spark plug. And have a look at the tip of this spark plug. This is I believe it's an iridium spark plug, and it has a very unique profile on the tip here. So these are the spark plugs that go into this engine. In order to reinstall the spark plugs, you're going to need a 5/8 spark plug socket. I recommend using an extension. And what we'll do is we'll start by setting the spark plug into the socket, and then we'll come down in here and I'll just put those in hand tight. I'll have to grab my my socket, my ratchet over there. Yeah. So I don't have the torque spec for the spark plugs, but you want to make sure that you put them tight. There's a crush washer on these spark plugs, and because we're not replacing them, these washers have already been crushed, so you want to go a little bit tight to make sure that they're seated well. So just use common sense. And we'll then proceed to number 2. So the engine is labeled cylinder 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see that on the valve cover there. Okay. So I'll set in number 2. Good. All right. So the 4 spark plugs are installed. The next thing I'm going to do now is install the coils. So I have the coils all labeled 1 through 4, and they just set down inside like this. You push them in so that they seat. And then they're held in place with a number 10 bolt 10mm bolt, and I have a little bit of anti-seize on the threads just to keep things nice and well lubricated. And again, you don't want to over tighten these bolts. They're just you know, they're fine threads, so just be careful how tight you put these. Just put them hand tight. Okay, so once the retainer bolt's in place, you'll then reattach the connector, and the connector is also labeled 1. As you see here, there's a 1 here, there's a 2 there, a 3 there, and a 4 there. So they all correspond to the cylinder, and make sure you press this in until you hear the click. Okay, so I'll now proceed repeating that step for the remaining 3 cylinders. There you have it. So my spark plugs are reinstalled, my coil packs are reinstalled, and all my electrical terminations are back in place. My oil filter is installed and tight. My caps are installed and tight. The next step will be is to attach the lanyard and start the engine up. Let the engine run for no more than 15 seconds. Once I'm satisfied that the engine is running, I'll turn the engine off and I'll check my levels again, my oil levels, to make sure they're correct. And then I'll attach the water supply to this, and then we'll proceed with the winterization. I'll attach the lanyard. I don't know if you heard, but once the lanyard was attached, I heard the fuel pump come on. So therefore the fuel pump has pressurized the fuel rail. Now I should just be able to click the start button and it will start. Try that again. There you go. So I counted about 10 seconds. So what we're going to do now is okay, what are we going to do now? So that's going to be it for this video. In this video you saw the oil change, and key message here is that this particular ski with this particular engine requires 4.1 liters of 10W40 oil. One piece of advice I'd like to just share, unlike an oil change in an engine in a truck or car where you can just unscrew a drain plug from the bottom of an oil pan and let the oil drain out, is that you need to basically suck the oil out of the engine to do an oil change. So I just want to end off the video with just showing how I did that. So I bought basically it's an oil extractor. It's a pump. You know, you can buy these at a big box store. So I bought this at at Princess Auto, where you can find, you know, this is a Harbor Freight equivalent. You know, you just take this line, insert it into the bottom of the engine, and then you just take another hose and you just have that hose dump into a reservoir, and you just go ahead and you just basically pump the oil out and into a reservoir. So I think I paid about $20 for this after tax, so it came in pretty handy, and you'll need this if you want to do this yourself. Because there's limited information available on the kind of setup you need to do an oil change using an oil extractor, once you buy the oil extractor pump, you need to then get the right size hose. And the sizing is important because the tube itself has to get inserted into the oil neck on the engine in order to extract the oil. For the setup that I made, which worked pretty well, I bought hose that was 5/16. So it's 5/16 outer diameter. So if you go to your hardware store and you buy a 5/16 diameter outside diameter hose or tube, it will fit inside the oil neck of the engine, so that you can then do the oil extraction. What you may have to do though is, and I'll just show this. Let me get a nice contrast here. What you may have to do is then create a fitting like this. Okay, so I have a brass barb fitting where I'm taking my 5/16 diameter outside diameter hose. I'm attaching it to this barb fitting, and then I have a connector here that's stepping up the diameter to accommodate a larger hose. So as you can see right here, I'm using a fuel line, and it has a 5/16 inner diameter, and I believe it's a 1 inch. So if I use my tape measure, I think this is a 1 inch fuel line. I'm sorry, that's a 1/2 inch. Yeah, well, it's about almost 5/8. And that line itself fits relatively well inside this oil extractor pump. So all to say, the key message, I think, that for you, for your oil extraction, for your ski is get yourself a 5/16 outer diameter hose, and that way you'll be sure to get the hose inside the engine deep enough that you can do the oil extraction. But I guess that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, this is not an explicit how-to, but just a glimpse of how I undertook that job. So stay tuned for the next video where we're going to winterize this machine. See you next time.